Hey everybody, Professor Cicerelli here. Got another video for you, and you see the house connector piece, so you know what that means. It means we're going to be doing something related to that video we talked about with prepositions. Actually, this is a video where we're going to be talking about conjunctions. Now, just like prepositions, conjunctions are also super important if you're trying to write a sentence where there's any kind of complexity to it or length to the sentence. You're going to need to use prepositions, and you're going to need to use conjunctions. If you've been writing English sentences, you probably already have been using these. You just maybe have not been aware that you're using them, and that's part of the reason part of why I'm making these videos is so that to make you more aware of how everything's functioning grammatically in your sentences. So, what I want to again reiterate with conjunctions is that they are like these connector pieces. Just like the prepositions were these corner pieces that allow you to hold together the structure of a sentence and build up sentences just like you're building up this house here. Prepositions do the same thing. Conjunctions do the same thing as prepositions, but like I hinted at in the preposition video, conjunctions are more versatile. They can do more. Conjunctions can. And so let's break down exactly what we're talking about when we talk about conjunctions. There are these connector words, just like the prepositions, but they're more versatile. I like to make the silly analogy that, I don't know, my students sometimes laugh at me, but I like to make the analogy that conjunctions, if prepositions and conjunctions are both people and they both go to the gym, think of the conjunction as being able to lift more weight. Okay, the conjunction is stronger and can hold more weight, more grammatical weight in a sentence. Okay, so whereas prepositions could hold just nouns and pronouns in a sentence. Okay. Conjunctions can hold nouns, pronouns, verbs, phrases, and even entire clauses. Okay, we mentioned in the video about prepositions that word clause contains a subject and a verb. Okay, phrase, remember from that other video, was missing subject, verb, or both, but clauses have subject and verb. Okay, and so you could see that just from what the conjunction is able to do, that it's got more uses for it, and it's doing more in the sentence. Okay, so you've got two kinds of conjunctions. You've got what's called a coordinating conjunction, and you've got a subordinating conjunction. Okay, when you think of, and I've underlined these to help you remember certain aspects, when you're thinking of coordinating conjunctions, think cooperating, think grammatical equality. Okay, I think I put in my, I think it was my subject. Oh yeah, it was my subject and object video. I think I mentioned that. Think of and in a sentence as like a big equal sign. Okay, coordinating conjunctions show equality. They show grammatical equality. Words on both sides of that and need to be grammatically equal. I should say words on both sides of that and, phrases on both sides of that and, clauses on both sides of that and need to be grammatically equal. If they're not, that's when you have syntax problems. Okay. So what are my coordinating conjunctions showing grammatical equality? So what are my coordinating conjunctions? There are 7 of them. I think I only have 6. Oh, yet is the last one. So and, but, or, nor, so, and for. Those are our coordinating conjunctions. Okay? They show grammatical equality. When you use coordinating conjunctions, very often, you're creating what are called independent clauses. I'm going to explain that term on the next slide when we look at it. So just remember for now that coordinating conjunctions, or rather I should say independent clauses, are associated with coordinating conjunctions. Just have that in the back of your mind. Now, when we talk about subordinating conjunctions, okay, subordinating conjunctions are kind of the opposite of coordinating conjunctions, where the coordinating conjunctions were all about equality and cooperating. Subordinating conjunctions show, well, the sub tells you sort of beneath or less than, and so subordinating conjunctions show grammatical inequality. They show that one part of the sentence is, I don't want to say less important, but that one part of the sentence depends on the other part of the sentence. When you think about subordinating conjunctions, think about dependent clauses. That one part of the sentence is going to depend upon the other, or that one part of the sentence is less important, you could say, than the other. Now, it's worth saying at this point, before we start looking at some examples, that when you look at these dependent or independent clauses, they're always going to begin the same way. So just like a prepositional phrase, when we talked in the prepositional phrase video, just like a prepositional phrase always begins with a preposition, a dependent clause, which we're going to look at, a dependent clause will always begin with a subordinating conjunction. Now, what are some of our subordinating conjunctions? When, because, although, even though, before, after, etc. And again, etc. is not a subordinating conjunction, it just means the list goes on. And same holds true with coordinating conjunctions. They're always going to be, the independent clauses rather. Independent clauses are always going to begin with coordinating conjunctions. Okay? Oh, correction. Independent clauses, because they are, as we're going to see, they're complete sentences. Sometimes they will just begin. They will be the beginning of the sentence, but think of the and, but, or as places where you can look for possible independent clauses. So if you've got an independent clause in a sentence and there's an and at the beginning of it, the very beginning of the independent clause will be at that and everything that comes after it. So I misspoke there. Not to say that all independent clauses start with coordinating conjunctions, because sometimes we'll just have a sentence, a complete thought that does not have any conjunctions at all. So all I mean to say is that when you have a word like and, but, or, and it's followed by a subject and a verb, you're always going to have an independent clause. Okay. I made a mistake there. Okay. All right, so let's look at some examples. Okay. So look at this first sentence, and I want you to see here, so just referring back to our previous slide, that these are our coordinating conjunctions. We said that conjunctions can hold just nouns in the sentence. They could also hold pronouns, verbs, phrases, even entire clauses. Okay, so keep this in mind as we're going through. Okay, so John and Sally met at the museum, but it was closing soon. Okay, so what do we see there? I'll walk you through for these first couple, and then I will leave the last few for you to try out in the comment section. But let's have a look. So I've got one coordinating conjunction here, and I've got the other coordinating conjunction, but, over here. Okay. What is my and connecting here? It's simply connecting noun to noun. Noun, John, other noun, Sally. And just like we said, ands are equal signs. John is a subject, Sally is a subject. Together they're a compound subject. Okay, and so that and at the beginning is doing this. It's holding two nouns together. Okay. Now what about my second coordinating conjunction, but? Because we said but's also a coordinating conjunction. Okay. Is it holding just nouns together? No, this one is actually holding this entire clause, John and Sally met at the museum, which, by the way, is an independent clause. I know it's independent because it can stand on its own as a complete sentence. It's got a subject and a verb, and even an object in this case. Okay, so it's not just connecting noun to noun. It's connecting independent clause to independent clause. Okay? And like I said to you previously, if I've got but followed by a subject, which is it, and then verb, which is was closing, and if you want more information on what that verb tense was closing, what that's all about, I have a video on verbs. Check that out. So it's connecting complete sentence to complete sentence or independent clause to independent clause here. And you'll notice that to signal that I've got two independent clauses connected with a coordinating conjunction, but you put the comma before that coordinating conjunction. Okay? What is at the museum? Can you figure out what that is? If you watched my preposition video, you should know what at the museum is. Okay, I won't tell you, but if you watch that video, you'll know what at the museum is. You'll know what at is, and you'll know what the museum is and what together what they are. Okay, next sentence. John went to the museum and saw Sally before he went home. Look at this one. This is an interesting one. There's a lot going on here. A lot grammatically. There's not much going on in the sentence. I know they're not super creative, but let's look at it. Okay, John went to the museum. Is that a complete thought? Yes. John, subject, went, museum, object. Okay, so subject, verb, object. John went to the museum is a complete thought. Now, and saw Sally. I've got an and, right? Am I connecting entire clauses together? Careful here. What is and holding in the sentence? What is it connecting? It's connecting saw Sally, not this, because this has got some other thing going on here. There's another word here that we're going to talk about before, which is another conjunction. So it's not. So our and is not holding or lifting that. It's only holding or lifting in the sentence saw Sally. Okay, is that a clause? Is saw Sally a clause? Say that 3 times fast. Is saw Sally a clause? It's not. It does not have a subject and a verb. It has a verb and an object, but it does not have a subject. So what's going on here? What's going on here is I have John went to the museum, complete thought. And what I have is John went to the museum, complete sentence, connected to what's called a verb phrase. It has a verb, but it's not complete. So it's a phrase, and it is a verb phrase because it contains a verb. So I've got John went to the museum, complete thought, connected to a verb phrase, and saw Sally. Now, what about before he went home? Look over here. Okay, before he went home is a dependent clause. Okay, hopefully you're able to get that. Yeah, before he went home is a dependent clause. It depends on the rest of the sentence. It depends on the fact that this part of the sentence is complete, and it is. Okay, but before he went home by itself is not a complete sentence. Okay. Yes, it has a subject and a verb. All clauses have subjects and verbs. But because this begins with a subordinating conjunction, the subordinating conjunction makes it not complete. It makes it so that this dependent clause needs something else and depends on something else. Okay. All right, so how does that dependent clause begin? Like I said, it always begins with that subordinating conjunction here, and then it has a subject, verb, object, but it does not have It's not complete on its own. It needs this complete sentence here. Okay. Now, I'm going to do a whole separate video on starting sentences with because, but for now, all you should know is because is a subordinating conjunction just like any other subordinating conjunction. If you could begin a sentence with when, you can begin a sentence with because. I know lots of you have heard from English teachers in years past that you cannot start a sentence with because. This is nonsense. Okay, I don't know why this information got started circulating, but I'll make a whole separate video on it because it's a lie. It's not true. So you'll see an example, and it's the example I'm going to have you do down in the comment section. But you can absolutely start a sentence with because. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as I've got my dependent clause followed by my independent clause. As long as you follow that rule, you should be fine. Okay. All right, let's look at one more, and then I'll leave those two. I'll leave the last two to have you do in the comment section. Okay, before he went home, John visited the museum and saw Sally. Okay, what have I done here? I basically rewrote the sentence. I tweaked a little bit, but I basically just rewrote the previous sentence. Okay, what did I do? Grammatically speaking, what did I do here? If you're thinking to yourself, well, you just move stuff around. Well, what stuff? What did I move around? Specifically, I moved my dependent clause, which here was at the end of the sentence. I moved it to the beginning. Okay. I didn't change anything grammatically other than placement stuff. Still my dependent clause is before he went home. Okay. Still my independent clause is John visited the museum and saw Sally. And saw Sally is still a verb phrase, just like in the previous sentence. I didn't change that. All I did was change the placement of that dependent clause. Do you notice something else? Hopefully you did. If you're looking carefully, you did. I added a comma. Okay. I'm going to have whole separate video. I will have series of videos on commas and comma placement. But one general tidbit to remember with dependent clauses is when you have a dependent clause before your independent clause, separate it from the independent with a comma. Why is that? Why is that? Well, when you don't have a comma, again, remember, those dependent clauses are going to end with, usually are going to end with nouns. So you want to make sure your reader doesn't make the confusion of connecting these two nouns. So you want to separate them. There is no confusion in the previous sentence of connecting nouns because before is standing between Sally and my other noun, he. Okay, but when I rearrange and have my dependent then my independent, I've got noun home running right into noun John, and so that my reader doesn't make the confusion of thinking one of them is an adjective and the other is a noun, or thinking they're both nouns that are connected in some way. You separate them with commas so that I know complete thought ends here, or rather I should say dependent clause ends here and then complete thought begins after it. Okay, separated with commas. You might even notice when you read the sentences that when you start with the dependent clause, there's a little bit of a pause, whereas there isn't a pause with the other one. So for example, John went to the museum and saw Sally before he went home. I went right from Sally to before. There was no pause there at all. So John went to the museum and saw Sally before he went home. No pause really. Before he went home, John visited the museum and saw Sally. Sorry. Before he went home, John visited the museum and saw Sally. You hear the pause there? Before he went home, John visited the museum and saw Sally. There's a little bit of a pause there. And so that pause is where you put the comma, and it's to separate those two nouns, home and John. Okay, that's dependent. That's those two. Like I said, try these in the comment section. We got one more thing to try here. Find the independent clauses find the dependent clauses just by looking at these sentences. See if you can do it. So try the first one. You're looking for the independent clauses. Now, hopefully you've watched my preposition video so that you know where to distinguish a prepositional phrase from an independent clause. But all right, were you able to find it? Okay, before school, you might think, oh, that's a dependent clause. Nope. Nope. Not a complete. Remember, clause, subject and verb. I don't have a subject and verb here. What I have is a prepositional phrase at the beginning. And if you watch my video, it's a prepositional phrase of time before school. They liked to watch the news and eat breakfast. Okay, well, I've got subject they, verb liked. What did they like? To watch the news, object. And I've got a coordinating conjunction, and, but, just like on the previous slide with this one. And eat breakfast is not an independent clause. This begins with and, which is a coordinating conjunction. But all I have here is this whole thing is an independent clause, and it's an independent clause made up of complete thought here connected to another verb phrase, eat breakfast. But is the beginning of my second independent clause, but Thursday was a busy morning. Okay. Do I have a complete thought? Yes, Thursday subject was verb. Okay. See if you could find the dependent clause in the second one. The dependent clause or clauses, plural. All right, you able to find it? Okay, when you are bird watching, you notice there's a comma here at the beginning. Do I have a dependent clause here? Well, ask yourself, does my dependent clause, does this begin with a subordinating conjunction? Yes, begins with when. Okay. Do I have a subject and a verb? Yeah, you, subject, are bird watching. Okay, and like I said, are bird watching, certain kind of verb tense we can talk about. Well, we will. I talk about in another video. So I've got a complete thought here. Sorry, not a complete thought. I've got a clause here, and it happens to be a dependent clause because it begins with a subordinating conjunction. Sorry about that. Yeah, I've got a dependent clause here because I've got subject and verb, as we just saw, you and bird watching, and begins with subordinating conjunction. So I've got dependent clause number one. Do I have another one? Yes. Because this could scare the birds. Where does that dependent clause begin? Always begins with that subordinating conjunction. Is because a subordinating conjunction? Yes. Remember back to our list. Okay, so begins here right before because, and it ends at the end of the sentence. I've got a subject and verb, so I know it's a clause. I've got this and could scare. Okay. And then birds is the object. So this subject, could scare, verb, birds, object. Okay. And then what is you should not make any sudden movements? That's an independent clause. So what do I have here? I've got dependent clause followed by independent clause followed by another dependent clause. Okay. Tricky. But if you follow this, look at the previous slides, you'll see that, and you go back and watch, you'll see that it all connects. Okay. So down in the comments, try these last two and let me know.